from the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hey, thank you for listening, whether it's on Georgia Now, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, the replay, 8 to 10 a.m. on Georgia Now, or if you listen via podcast, well, you can do that. That's certainly an easy way to do it. Thank you so much. We appreciate the time. I'm going to dive in on a piece first that focuses on Fulton County. I know, you're in Atlanta, you're going to talk Fulton County. I think this is a conversation that, while maybe impacting Fulton County, I think it leads to an overarching conversation about philosophy when it comes to addressing crime, policing. In fact, I can even draw a little bit from a story that I read about New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, who made a curious decision when it came to who's going to head the city's police department there. In fact, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read a little bit from the New York Times morning email, Sam Silton writing. Get this. Zohran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York City, said yesterday that Jessica Tisch, the city's police commissioner, would stay in that job when he takes office on January 1st. Silton writing, it's an unlikely partnership. My colleagues Maria Kramer and Emma G. Fitzsimmons wrote. He's a Democratic socialist who wanted to defund the police, Emma told me. She's pretty conservative on policing. Tisch wants to hire 5,000 new police officers. Mamdani does not. He supports the elimination of bail for most misdemeanors. She has been sharply critical of changes to the bail laws. They come from very different backgrounds, too. Mamdani, age 34, is the son of an academic and a filmmaker. Tisch, age 44, is a billionaire heiress whose family gave a lot of money to Mamdani's competition. Awkward. And they have different views of the outside world. Silton writes, Tisch has marched on the city's annual Israel Day parade. Mamdani has been a fierce critic of Israel. But they have pledged to work together, even if there are genuine areas of disagreement. Of course they have. Tisch wants to keep a powerful job that she loves, and Mamdani wants the police and voters who support them to see that he's not the far-left caricature his critics have drawn. I think that's kind of genius, honestly. Silton writes, they made nice yesterday. I've admired her work cracking down on corruption in the upper echelons of the police department, driving down crime in New York City, and standing up for New Yorkers in the face of authoritarianism, Mamdani said of Tisch. Tisch, no less polite, they write. It's clear that we share broad and crucial priorities, the importance of public safety, the need to continue driving down crime, and the need to maintain stability and order across the department, she wrote in an email sent to officers. Silton writes, in an air of partisan rancor across the country, this was refreshing to see. If the partnership holds, it's a reminder that people who disagree don't have to be enemies, that the incoming mayor doesn't have to throw out all the experienced hands, but focusing on consensus instead of division is an art, not fine art, but the art of the possible. Okay, back to the Fulton County story. And again, this is not just a Fulton County scenario, right, when it comes to the overarching philosophy of how we societally or municipally or even at the county level or the state level handle crime prevention and policing, public safety. Who is reporting on this story? Aliyah Farr at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution writes, Fulton County's chief financial officer presented commissioners Wednesday with a proposed budget that includes a tax increase to improve deplorable conditions at the county jail, which is the subject of a legal agreement called a consent decree with the U.S. Department of Justice. Property taxes would increase by 0.39 mils or 39 cents for every $1,000 in assessed property value. Aliyah did the math, too. That would cost $62.40 for the owner of a home with a fair market value of $400,000. The tax hike would raise almost $32 million next year for consent decree expenses the county commission approves, described in the budget proposal as, quote, contractual and operational items. I can tell you, however, $32 million is but a drop in the bucket for the needs for improving or building a new county jail. An outline of those expenses, Farr writes, was not immediately available, a county spokesperson said. To date, all decree compliance-related costs are still being vetted and have not been determined, but as costs accelerate from partial year to full year recurring implementation, this number is expected to grow. Yeah. And then there's this. All department and agency budgets would be reduced by 1% to fund more staffing at the jail, according to the proposal. The county's proposed budget for next year totals $1.4 billion, an overall increase of almost $11 million from this year's budget. The jail came under federal oversight earlier this year after a U.S. Department of Justice investigation found conditions there were, quote, abhorrent and unconstitutional. County Manager Dick Anderson said the separate tax was proposed to isolate consent decree costs from the rest of the operating budget, but acknowledged the impact to taxpayers would be the same. The property tax rate would increase by more than 4%. Aaliyah Farr points out some commissioners complain the proposal is confusing. I mean, it is, admittedly. Mo Ivory saying, I cannot vote for a budget that I cannot confidently explain to the taxpayers that fund it. Farr writing, when the county commission considered a $1 million increase this summer, citing consent decree costs, they were met with strong public opposition. We have to understand that and realize that that's where our citizens are, said Vice Chair Bob Ellis, noting that overall expenditures were increasing by 12%. I really think we need to look at it and see how we can get that total millage rate assumption to a flat number. See, in my mind, this, again, comes back to policing and how we decide to police. And the demonization of the philosophy on the left that what we don't need are simply just more boots on the ground, police officers. What we need are folks who work within the police department who may not necessarily be police officers, but can be complementary to our police force. Psychologists, for example, folks who deal with addiction, substance abuse addiction, mental illness, even if it's just temporary. I mean, mental illness doesn't have to be a lifelong issue. Sometimes we have officers who head to domestic disputes who have absolutely no concept, no background whatsoever in dealing with domestic disputes or crisis counseling or anything like that. They come with body cameras, often batons, tasers, lethal weapons, but they don't come with a background in counseling, psychology, and that's to offer no disrespect to those who serve on the thin blue line. That's not what they signed up to do. And the really unfortunate part is we live in a society with more of an appetite for incarcerating our mentally unwell versus treating the mentally unwell. We live in a society that has no appetite for spending money to house the unhoused, but are all too eager to figure out ways to house the unhoused at a vastly more expensive level, but in a way that doesn't better them in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Here's where the realtor in me, and by the way, you're going to hear a lot from the realtor in me today. Here's where the realtor in me also goes, it's already super expensive to live in the city of Atlanta, Fulton or DeKalb. But if Fulton's going to raise their property taxes to accommodate the building of a jail, on the heels of the county also looking to build a public safety training facility, the city obviously already built theirs in DeKalb County, unincorporated DeKalb County. It seems as if both Fulton County and the city of Atlanta have an appetite for training officers to do more arresting and putting away. But we just had an election, by the way, where our city council president-elect demonized the man she ran against because he dared to come close to even saying the word defund the police. Never did. He just advocated for what I'm advocating for, which is complementary services within our law enforcement agency in the city of Atlanta that wouldn't necessarily mean more badged officers on the ground, but support services and staffing to assist with the officers so that the agency on the whole is better equipped to handle situations that don't always call for handcuffs and incarceration. Listen, I've no doubt that the Fulton County Jail is a deplorable place to spend a few hours, let alone overnight, a day, a week, a month, months to a year or more. I will not defend the condition that the jail is in, and I'm not one to say that Fulton County doesn't need to either drastically improve the facility they have or work towards building another one. Not going to say that. I will, however, say that it seems as if, once again, we look at a municipality and a county and a metro area and a state and a country that has painted itself into a corner where the appetite for a show of force, and goodness knows we have a president who loves to send the National Guard around willy-nilly to give us more of that when and if necessary, right? We live in a society where the show of force is coveted, but the results of improvement are not. We live in the most incarcerated society on the planet, and a society as a nation that claims to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. We have too few politicians brave enough to say that maybe we shouldn't be the most incarcerated nation on the planet. That we should not defund the police, but actually augment and complement our law enforcement with services that our citizens obviously need. Let me, a quick anecdote. I was moving into my new condo here a couple of weeks back, first of the month, right? And I was leaving the garage and I pulled out to the main drag of the condo community I live in. And there were, there were at least half a dozen APD squad cars. And one of those, SWAT team bomb-resistant trucks that can carry, a bunch of police officers in riot gear in the back. This was, and I pulled up to a couple of the officers who were just sitting there shooting the breeze at the back of a trunk. They seemed to be okay. We weren't in any sort of active scenario, and I didn't see cameras or lighting or anything like that, so it wasn't a filming of Will Trent or something like that, which films in Atlanta all the time, by the way. I asked the officer, the handsome one, I said, what's going on here? Should I be concerned? I just moved into this neighborhood, and this seems like a safe place to live. He said, we're just serving a search warrant. Oh, my God. There were I have to guess, 30 or so officers and those in riot gear and the squad cars and the bomb-resistant vehicle that was there to serve a search warrant? I mean, clearly they believed there was some cause for their own safety, but we didn't get warned any of that was going on. And I just have to ask, was all that necessary? And if you were dealing with an individual to serve a search warrant that was such a cause for concern, I just want to know who in the squad cars or the riot gear or the bomb-resistant vehicle was equipped to deal with somebody clearly that unstable. Something to think about. Back in just a second. It's The Ron Show on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Real quick, the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control, again in the spotlight. AP medical writer Mike Stabi writing that a Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website has been changed to contradict the longtime scientific conclusion that vaccines do not cause autism, spurring outrage among a number of public health and autism experts. The CDC vaccine safety webpage was updated Wednesday saying, quote, the statement, vaccines do not cause autism, is not an evidence-based claim. The change is the latest move by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to revisit and foster uncertainty about long-held scientific consensus about the safety of vaccines and other pharmaceutical products. It was immediately decried by scientists and advocates who have long been focused on finding the causes of autism. We're appalled to find that the content on the CDC webpage, Autism and Vaccines, has been changed and distorted and is now filled with anti-vaccine rhetoric and outright lies about vaccines and autism. That according to the Autism Science Foundation, who released a statement earlier today. Widespread scientific consensus and decades of studies have firmly concluded there is no link between vaccines and autism. Quote, the conclusion is clear and unambiguous, said Dr. Susan Cressley, president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, in a statement on Thursday, which we will get to. We call on the CDC to stop wasting government resources to amplify false claims that sow doubt in one of the best tools we have to keep children healthy and thriving, those being routine immunizations. More from the AJC. The CDC has until now echoed the absence of a link in promoting Food and Drug Administration licensed vaccines. But anti-vaccine activists, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who this year became Secretary of Health and Human Services, have long claimed, without basis by the way, that there is one. It's unclear if anyone at CDC was actually involved in the change or whether it was done by Kennedy's HHS, which oversees the CDC. Many at the CDC, however, were surprised. At least that's what we're hearing from those who still have contact within the CDC. I spoke with several scientists at CDC yesterday, and none were aware of this change in content, according to Dr. Deborah Howery, who was part of a group of CDC top officials that resigned from the agency in August. When scientists are cut out of scientific reviews, then inaccurate and ideological information results. And by the way, we'll get to that as well when it involves the trans community at the bottom of the second hour of today's show. Back to the AJC, the updated page does not cite any new research. It instead argues that past studies supporting a link have been ignored by health authorities. HHS has launched a comprehensive assessment of the causes of autism, including investigations on plausible biologic mechanisms and potential causal links. Additionally, we're updating the CDC's website to reflect gold standard evidence-based science. What is it with gold in this administration? Anyway, that's from the HHS spokesman, Andrew Nixon, in an email put out today. A number of former CDC officials have said that what CDC posts about certain subjects, including vaccine safety, sadly, can no longer be trusted. Dr. Daniel Jernigan, who also resigned from the agency in August, told reporters Wednesday that Kennedy seems to be, quote, going from evidence-based decision-making to decision-based evidence-making. Wow. I like that. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Louisiana Republican, who, by the way, I believe is a doctor as well, earlier this year played a decisive role in approving Kennedy's nomination for HHS secretary. Cassidy initially voiced misgivings about Kennedy, but in February said Kennedy had, quote, pledged, among other things, not to remove language from the CDC website pointing out that vaccines do not cause autism. Well, Dr. Cassidy, now what? The new site continues to have a headline that says, vaccines do not cause autism, but HHS officials put an asterisk next to that. A note at the bottom of the page says the phrasing, quote, has not been removed due to an agreement with the chair of the U.S. Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee that it would remain on the CDC website. That's Senator Bill Cassidy, by the way. Cassidy spokespersons did not immediately respond to requests for a comment. Someone I follow on social media, I mean, I don't even know if he, well, you know what, he posted on social media, so it's up for him to deal with. He is Dr. David Blake, professor at the Department of Neuroscience and Regenerative Medicine at the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University. He posted on his own social media early this morning. Fundamentally, the medical portions of our government are not reliable and trustworthy anymore. I would say we have a third world government, but even there, I don't think governments post medically harmful information. You need to get medical advice from physicians and read up on the documents on their professional group websites, like the AMA website. For vaccines and autism, you can look at the American Academy of Pediatrics. It will be a long, hard climb to reestablish trust in the medical aspects of government from here. The CDC, NIH, HHS, FDA, and it certainly depends on how much further down the rabbit hole we go, he wrote. Speaking of the American Academy of Pediatrics, their response, multiple studies from around the world have found no credible link between autism and vaccines. Continuing to push this false science poses significant risks to public health, particularly during one of the worst measles outbreaks in decades. You think that's coincidence? It is also hurtful to the autistic community and a disservice to the thousands of autistic children and adults living rich, fulfilling lives. But if you think, I simply think I'm hyperpartisan because I think RFK Jr. is a buffoon, let me tell you what his wife said. This according to a piece from Teddy Grant, who writes for The Hill. Actress Cheryl Hines initially expressed disbelief when her husband, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., said he was running for president in the 2024 race. A few years ago, Bobby came to me and said, how would you feel if I ran for president? She told the Times of London. And I said, president of what? I just kind of keep going back to what libertarianism is, right? Libertarians believe in as stripped down a federal state government as is humanly possible. The go at your own approach, right? And ironically, that seems to be, I mean, we're seeing the evisceration of the Department of Education. And honestly, what's happening is pieces and parts of the Department of Education are being placed into other departments that are wholly incapable of handling their own caseload without taking on somebody else's. But nonetheless, the belief that a stripped down version of government means that we, the individual, can just take care of ourselves. And this is something of a case study in that. Again, with the largest measles outbreak in decades, it would seem that we are not capable of taking care of ourselves without some sort of guidance from learned officials in proper places in our government. And as I look at the calendar, I'm reminded we are just 11 months into a 48-month experiment in leadership by lunacy. It's The Ron Show, back after this.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show.
Airing 4 to 6 p.m. weekdays on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Hour number 2, we're going to speak with David Schechter from CBS News in Dallas, Texas. There is some cause for concern as we head into the winter months. Remember Texas, winter, utilities? Ted Cruz heading to Cancun. There's concern about the potential for brownouts, blackouts, even rolling blackouts in the winter months because of the power being used by data centers. That's an interesting story, right? As we banty about data centers in the state of Georgia. And of course, we're just coming off the fresh Public Service Commission races where our utility bills being reflected with increases because of things like data centers and the construction of Plant Vogel, et cetera, and so on. 6 increases in the last, 3 years? 2 years? That's an interesting story. We'll talk with David Schechter a little bit about that. I want to read to you a little bit from today's Politically Georgia blog from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There seems to be a little bit of aisle crossing, but I'm not really surprised when you hear the name Esther Panitch. You're like, yeah, okay. So here's the background on this story. The December 2nd runoff for Sandy Springs mayor is technically nonpartisan, though it sure doesn't feel that way. Reading again from the AJC, incumbent Rusty Paul, seeking a 4th term, is a former Georgia GOP chair and ex-state senator with deep roots in the conservative movement. His challenger, Dante Carter, a left-leaning activist whose campaign is buoyed by Democratic heavyweights. That's why news that dropped late Wednesday landed with extra force, as State Representative Esther Panitch, a Democrat who represents a large slice of Sandy Springs, said she's breaking with her party to endorse Rusty Paul. Panitch, the only Jewish member of the Georgia legislature, said Paul has, quote, consistently stood with the Jewish community and directly confronted rising anti-Semitism. I don't know what the underlying message is here about Dante Carter and anti-Semitism, but Panitch continues. He understands, Rusty Paul, the incumbent, that leadership means having the moral courage to name the threats facing specific communities, not papering over them with generalities, she said. He has always shown up, she writes. This matters profoundly. Dante Carter, meanwhile, rolled out a range of endorsements of his own for his rematch against Rusty Paul, who defeated him in 2021. They include the left-leaning Georgia Conservation Voters, State Representative Gabriel Sanchez, the chamber's only Democratic Socialist, and Michael Woolman, the Southern Regional Director for the Young Democrats of America's Jewish Caucus. That's not all. Former gubernatorial nominee Stacey Abrams is set to boost Carter's campaign at a phone bank event on Friday. Carter responded early Thursday that he stood by, quote, every community targeted by hate, including Jewish Georgians. He called Panitch's endorsement, quote, an excuse to endorse a Republican. Now, here's the part I won't sugarcoat, Carter said. Too many Democrats are so busy crossing the aisle to chase Republican votes that they forget how to walk across the community to earn Democratic ones. Oh, he's not wrong there. Incidentally, I did reach out to Dante to see if he wanted to come on the show to comment further on this. Unfortunately, timing being what it was, we tried early today, and I'm sure he was involved in debate prep, perhaps, because there was a debate today at 3 o'clock. Again, this is a Sandy Springs, Georgia situation, so I don't know that I necessarily want to dive into the audio from that. It's just, I don't know. He did post about this earlier today, however. He said, I thought long and hard before responding. I asked for counsel. I slept on it. And I'm still at the same conclusion. A lie doesn't care who tells it. Yesterday, a Democratic state legislator called me after I received a strong endorsement from a Jewish supporter. She accused me of, quote, failing to call out anti-Semitism. Her entire argument rested on one edited post, while ignoring the post where I clearly and explicitly condemned anti-Semitism, like the one below. He shared screen grabs. And the truth is simple. This wasn't about protecting the Jewish community, he writes. This was about finding an excuse to endorse a Republican. You can cross the aisle without lying, he says. You can endorse the former chair of the Georgia Republican Party without mischaracterizing a fellow Democrat. Clearly, Panitch chose not to do that. He continues writing, you don't have to tear one of your own down to justify it. I've stood with every community, Dante writes, targeted by hate. Jewish, Black, Asian, Arab, LGBTQ+, and more. And the receipts are public. The post she referenced was edited at the request of a Jewish friend who wanted to make sure it didn't unintentionally assign group blame. That's called listening, he writes. And because of that listening, I was welcomed into interfaith circles where real conversations happened about naming hate, clearly protecting specific communities intentionally, and moving forward together. That's called community, Dante writes. If anything, criticize me for not calling out the DINOs, the Democrats in name only, sooner, he writes. My mama always said, it's never too late to get somebody together. Now here's the part I won't sugarcoat, Dante writes. Too many Democrats are so busy crossing the aisle to chase Republican votes that they forget how to walk across the community to earn Democratic ones. That's how we ended up with Trump in the White House, he writes, twice. That's the real political math. He says, I'll keep doing what I've always done. Stand up for every community targeted by hate. He punctuates this with the words, lead with truth and build a Sandy Springs where nobody gets left behind. Incidentally, the endorsement he received from Michael Woolman, the Southern Regional Director of the Young Democrats of America's Jewish Caucus, reads, I put my full support behind Dante Carter for mayor because he always puts Sandy Springs first. I know he will lift everyone up, whatever their faith, background, or belief system, with no exceptions. This isn't the first time Esther Panitch has bucked her party. She has had misgivings with Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock, with Senator John Ossoff, also Jewish, because they did not have rubber stamp, blanket, unfettered endorsements and capitulations and support for everything Benjamin Netanyahu wanted at any given point in time during the Israel-Gaza war. And I read between the lines. I know what Dante's saying here. He's essentially saying, if she wants to become a Republican, for crying out loud, just become a Republican. At least be honest. Don't be the sheep in wolf's clothing and pretend that you're still a Democrat, thinking that you can continue to do harm to your own party while uplifting those outside the party. And to what end? And for what cause? And for what reason? I mean, she likes to fling the word anti-Semitism about rather willy-nilly. But here I see a white state representative who lives in Sandy Springs endorsing the white candidate instead of the African-American in the same party she professes to belong to and has belonged to for quite a while. And what could one make of that? Not that I will, but what could one make of that? It's The Ron Show. Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or via podcast. I'm sure I've said it a time or 12, right? I am a realtor in Metro Atlanta. And I always have concerns when I see houses getting slapped up fast and on the market. And, just in the blink of an eye. Alonda Roca in the Georgia Recorder filed this story that really gave me some concerns. And I understand we have a housing crunch. We do have a deficit in supply, although we don't have much interest in buying right now because of the economy. So maybe this is the opportunity for home building to just do what it can comfortably at the pace that it can comfortably while the buying public just kind of catches their breath and lets the tariff situation or just the Trump economy in general settle, if it ever will. I mean, did it the first whatever. And Alonda Roker's piece here at the Georgia Recorder. Proponents of a bill here in Georgia designed to speed up the construction permitting process say the changes are needed to address a lack of affordable housing. But local officials and environmental groups warn the proposal would add a shot clock that could compromise public safety and lead to increased water pollution from construction runoff. And here I'm going to say, as a realtor who deals with inspectors all the time, it can deal with some other things too. It could wind up you're buying a house that was rushed to be built and on the market and sold, and then you come to find out, why is my foundation cracking? Why is the radon testing so frighteningly high? Why are those results so bad? Back to the article. The bill, sponsored by Representative Mike Chiokas, an Americus Republican, and backed by the home building industry, well, of course it is, was met with sharp opposition Tuesday at an off-session hearing before a subcommittee of a House Government Affairs Committee. The measure could limit local government's ability to adopt more stringent building codes by requiring a Georgia Department of Community Affairs review and accelerating the review timeline for denied soil erosion permits. The bill would mandate a specific written list of deficiencies in a subsequent 14-day review period. The bill that you see in front of you amends the existing statute to give that approval or disapproval process more teeth. If a local government wants to adopt a more stringent mandate in the construction code, they can continue to do that. But our goal would be for DCA to review that local amendment and make a binding determination about its need and whether it should be adopted locally, said the Executive Vice President of Home Builders Association of Georgia, Austin Hackney, who sat next to Chiokas during the presentation. The association and other proponents said that the delays, which they say can occur after a project has already received zoning approval, turn a process that should take 2 months into a year or more ordeal. Currently, I've heard horror stories of the length of time it takes for contractors to get a building permit, said Chiokas, saying that such delays add to the cost of housing. He argued his measure is one step toward addressing the rising cost of homes. Yeah, what about the tariffs we're inflicting on Canada and the cost of lumber? Does the Americans Republican have anything to say about that? The proposal faced pushback from the Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Commissioners in Georgia, which expressed concern that the mandated deadlines would compromise public safety and environmental oversight. Noah Ronitz, a senior government relations associate with the Georgia Municipal Association, said a main reason for delays is not politics or obstruction, but incomplete submissions, unlicensed engineers drawing plans. Oh, God. Repeated revisions that introduce new scopes to the developments and understaffing. The legislation was also opposed by environmental groups and Soil and Water Conservation District's Chattahoochee Riverkeeper Jason Olseth, a district supervisor with the Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District, said the accelerated timelines could apply to gigantic commercial projects like data centers. Not just housing. And he said it would cause, quote, a lot of confusion, a lot of heartache. I'm all for expediting housing, but to apply it to every project in Georgia is pretty tough to do, I think. And I'll say this, he said, I have reviewed thousands of plans. I'm a certified plan designer. I'm a certified plan reviewer. And out of all the plans that I see, the ones that slow down are the ones who don't do it right. The subcommittee took no action on the bill Tuesday. Lawmakers will return to Atlanta in January for the 2026 legislative session. Just, if you will, my friends, put a pin in that. We'll be keeping an eye on that. That is, I'm sorry, it's a little frightening. Again, as someone who has shown a lot of houses and a lot of new builds too, like the new builds are, I bought a new build actually in South Carolina, and the process is one that I tell buyers all the time, you don't necessarily have to have a realtor working with you, but understand that you're dealing with the home builder on your own without like representation. Not that we're lawyers, but it's like going into a court proceeding without representation. You want to hire an inspector outside of the home builder's purview Because obviously, if you hire the inspector, who's the inspector working for? Exactly. That's why you also want to make sure you have a realtor to pour over the contract and to make sure that all the I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed. But I've been through a lot of new builds in the 5-ish years. God, has it been that long? No, it's been longer. 7 years that I've been in real estate. And I can tell you, there's always, first of all, when you buy a new home, you can always expect some settling, right? There's always going to be settling. Houses settle. Ground settles. The earth settles. But corners can be cut. Rushes can be. And here's the other thing. We're talking about the cost of home building and all the impacts to it. I mean, we're sitting here watching as ICE is chasing folks out of laundromats into the woods. Have you seen those videos from the Carolinas? And I'm not condoning the hiring of undocumented labor to skirt labor laws here in the state of Georgia or in the United States. I'm saying the actual folks that are doing the illegal activity are the ones that are doing the hiring illegally. Like, bring it all above board. Pay these folks what our labor laws say an individual should be paid, and let's work on a process that expedites these folks' ability to work and work on the up and up and legally, instead of impacting our housing, our home building industry with the loss of labor, which means that those that you do hire, you have to pay more because lack of supply increases demand. It means the price goes up. Now, I've walked through a lot of new build homes where you can tell that there was a rush put on things, right? That things were not done on a methodical or timely manner. Timely meaning without respect to a deadline. That is a recipe for disaster. Eliminating needed obstacles. Yes, nobody likes red tape, right? There are reasons that rules come to exist. It's not as if there's this government bureaucracy. I feel like there's this mindset amongst a lot of folks, particularly on the right, who think that like a bureaucracy exists just to cook up ways to make life more miserable for people. It's not it at all. It's not this anti-capitalistic strain either. It's a matter of like public safety. OSHA exists for a reason, right? You know, you want your workplace to be safe. I know that employers, they don't like OSHA policy, but trust me when I tell you, behind most OSHA policies comes a horror story that enacted that policy in the first place, a reason it came to be. That's a story I'll be watching as the General Assembly comes into session in January. Jay Bookman, friend of the show, Georgia recorder, filed a piece that I sort of think captures what we're all feeling right now, right? What's real and what's not these days in Georgia politics, the headline asks. The subheadline, Marjorie Taylor Greene's rebrand and a deepfake video of U.S. Senator John Ossoff really add to the confusion. He writes, the lines that separate truth from falsehood, reality from fantasy have become so smeared in recent years that democracy itself becomes difficult. Edgar Allan Poe and later the Temptations gave us the motto for our times. Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. But which half to believe, he asks. We're now witnessing the introduction of high-quality AI-driven deepfake videos from Georgia politics, which makes it even harder to tell. For example, the other day I saw a clip that depicted Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the following. I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. It's something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I'm committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another. As Americans, we have far more in common than we have differences, and we have to be able to respect each other in our disagreements. Jay Bookman asks, was that real or was that an AI deepfake? He says, I'm told it's real, but I'm also told to believe none of what I hear, so. One way to approach that question is to first ask what we mean by real. If by real you mean, did it actually happen? Yes, it's real. Greene actually said those words. She's saying similar things quite a bit these days, to such an extent that she and Donald Trump are publicly exchanging charges that the other person has become a traitor. But is it real in terms of a sudden change of heart, a transformation by Greene from vicious culture warrior to a champion of peace, love, and understanding? Jay Bookman believes No, it's not. He writes, what we're seeing is Green's reaction to being told the obvious by Trump and other top Republicans, that she has no future in politics beyond representing Georgia's 14th congressional district. She didn't like to hear that, and what she now frames as enlightenment is better understood as just a different manifestation of the resentment and frustration that has fueled her entire political career, or as I would say, sour grapes. Bookman continues, it's important to remember that as far back as 2023, Green was publicly musing about her future as U.S. Senator, governor, or even higher. I have a lot of things to think about, she told a reporter back then. Am I going to be a part of President Trump's cabinet if he wins? Is it possible that I'll be VP? Bookman says, girl, no. Don't get me wrong, Green does have some gifts as a politician, chief among them her instinct for the swings and sways of popular opinion within MAGA. That's at play here too, he writes. It's no accident that she has dared to divorce herself from Trump at a moment when he has become vulnerable. The economy is shaky. His immigration policy is unpopular. The poll numbers are bad, and his bizarre mishandling of the Epstein case has made even close allies nervous. Green seems to sense that if a door has been slammed in her face, fate may be opening a window. And of course, Bookman pivots, we have an actual case of deepfake video in Georgia, created through artificial intelligence in the U.S. Senate race between incumbent John Ossoff and a handful of Republican challengers. U.S. Representative Mike Collins, the frontrunner in the race for the GOP nomination, has released a video in which a deepfake Ossoff can be heard and seen telling voters that he just doesn't care about the impact of the recent government shutdown on farmers. That is, his only concern is his out-of-state donors. It looks real, it sounds real, Bookman says, and given the regrettable gullibility of American voters, at least some of them are likely to take it as real. The Ossoff campaign condemned the video, pledging never to produce deepfakes of its own, while Collins dismisses any such concerns. It's just new technology and a new way to campaign, and you're going to see a lot more of that out there, he said. Bookman says politics has never been a particularly truthful endeavor, but even then, fake quotes and fake photos have always been considered unacceptable distortions. Like a lot of people these days, he writes, the Collins campaign appears to believe that technology voids all those rules. They're living an approach that Trump has driven home and that MAGA has fully embraced. If the rules and the norms get in the way of victory, screw the rules and the norms and never, ever apologize for doing so. Bookman writes, if it works, if there's no voter backlash to Collins' actions, then yes, we'll see a lot more of it. Down that road lies chaos, though. And Bookman says, and I'm hopeful that the American patience for chaos is running pretty thin these days. I'll include that in the show notes, ronshowatl.com. Another hour of The Ron Show comes to you in a matter of minutes, where we will have a conversation with CBS News reporter from Dallas, Texas, as a matter of fact. His name would be David Schechter, national environmental correspondent, who wonders if our power grids risk blackouts because of power used by data centers. Does that not sound like a relevant conversation to be had here in the next few days, weeks, months, looming years in the state of Georgia? I would think so. Thank you so much for listening to The Ron Show on Georgia Now, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voice via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Back after this.
Archived audio, blogs, social media links, and more, all in one place. Log on at ronshowatl.com.
Interesting story that is coming out of Texas, but I think is something that is top of mind for a lot of folks throughout the United States. The rise of data centers and the use of our utilities, water, power, for example, with those data centers, and what we're paying for it through our utility bills, obviously is what drove turnout in the latest Public Service Commission races here in the state of Georgia just about a month ago. See a change in 2 seats there that'll be taking place starting in 2026. National environmental correspondent with CBS News, David Schechter, is in Dallas reporting on the risk of winter blackouts because of power being used by data centers. David, thanks for joining the Ron Show today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So we all know the history, recent history, the Texas power grid and winter storms and how it gripped that state just a few years ago. We can all picture Ted Cruz in the airport waiting to head to Cancun while this is all going down. Unfortunately, that's like the lasting memory, but like people died. People were literally freezing in their homes or having to go to warming centers wherever they could find any because of those blackouts during the winter storms just a few years ago. And now, with data centers becoming more frequent, more common in areas where, any place that's susceptible to a blackout during a winter storm in the first place, this is a cause for concern. So what are you learning in Texas as far as this is concerned, and how is the Texas power grid adapting, or are they?
Well, I could tell you that, you mentioned this, but 200 people died in that winter storm. And I was here and lived through that. My dog's water bowl was frozen on the floor of our house for 3 days inside the house. It was incredibly cold, and it was scary and dangerous. And it kind of knocked the wind out of Texas's sails a little bit in terms of feeling like they were, nothing could stop Texas. Mm-hmm. So that was a concern. I mean, in that time, the proliferation of data centers has been enormous. And the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which is sort of the grid's security monitor, the electric grid security monitor, is telling us that regions across the country could face elevated risks for power shortages, like New England, Carolinas, Tennessee Valley, Texas, and several eastern Rocky Mountain states, also the Pacific Northwest, because there's more demand for electricity than potentially we might have if we get that perfect storm of the Arctic chill, Arctic blasts that we saw in Texas. It's right now, they're saying a low probability, like maybe a 1 in a decade type event. But I think they're taking the effort to warn us about it, which means it's significant.
And we've had so many 100-year storm events anyway here in the last 10 years that maybe we should take a once-in-a-decade concern pretty seriously. The irony is that when the power goes out, or we have some sort of an environmental issue, whether it be a massive storm of some sort or whatever, like, we're all racing to our phones to get information, or the internet to get information. And what we're doing is we're kind of feeding into what could be a cause for concern in the near future.
That's a thought. I hadn't thought about that, because you're using your phone, you're pulling power to the data center. The data center needs power to answer your query. I think the larger concern is sort of these variable loads. So, there's enough power in the grid to do all the things we need to do today without question. Mm-hmm. But in the middle of a winter, it becomes a bit of a different question, because if it gets severely cold, like if it gets, down to 5 degrees in Texas, then you've got this new demand, which is the heat. So you lay on top all the new data centers, and you've got electrification of cars, electrification of buildings. On any day, the United States is totally capable of handling that, but it's that extra load in wintertime, which I think that sets us off even more so than in summertime, when there's just more electricity available, particularly because solar power in the summertime has 12, 14, 16 hours of daylight. In the winter, there's less. They plan for all that. It's not a surprise or an emergency that there's a little less solar power in the winter, but a cold shock is something that we're just not really fully equipped for, a really, really big cold shock.
So do you believe that this is a uniquely Texas, or you mentioned actually there are a few other states that were at risk for this sort of thing. The diversification of the energy grid is what is so top of mind for a lot of folks. Here in Georgia, obviously, we just finished building a massive nuclear facility that they're now asking us to pay for a lot in cost overruns. But we're seeing a return to fossil fuel-driven power derivation. Obviously, Texas being a fossil fuel state and a drill haven. What is the you mentioned solar power, but how much of that actually is available in a state like Texas?
Well, you might be surprised to find out that Texas is the number one producer of wind and solar power.
Good.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Texas has had a pretty long history of diversification of its power grid. A lot of thoughtful leadership 20 years ago about building power lines, transmission lines out into the middle of nowhere, Texas, so that these wind farms could go up and these solar farms could go up. So there is a tremendous amount of renewable energy in Texas, and I think there was a rush to blame that for we had the
Right.
huge outage, and that was really not the case. And also, it's just not a surprise. Like, these people, they look at forecasts that these reliability people are looking at energy forecasts all the time. Historical data, current data, weather data, where's the sun going to shine? Where's the wind going to blow? And, they're always changing the mix every day for how things will provide. So we're talking about a demand issue more than we're talking about a supply issue.
And I guess the rise of the necessity of data centers is just something that hadn't been forecasted till now.
I think that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I know that the growth of data centers has been going on for a long time, and we are paying more attention to it now. It's really like past the tipping point. But that also goes through state regulators, state utility boards, and so they're looking at the grid and they're saying, I don't want to be the state utility guy who had the power go out in Georgia. So I think they're doing their best to manage the load in a sensible way. And these projects take several years to come on, and you have to apply. Are they too permissive to allow more power on more of data centers onto the grid? Do data centers, should they be required to come with their own power? Some of them do, but I don't think any of this is, again, a surprise. It isn't like we woke up and there were data centers. Like they get permitted and they take a long time to know that they're going to be on the grid and they're going to need power.
As we're heading into the winter months, this concern about the potential for blackouts, and again, knowing what Texas went through not all that long ago, is there any movement in on utility boards or in politics? Are there any politicians sounding the alarms about this?
In Texas, not particularly. I just think that there's a lot of conversation about how the energy is going to be produced for these data centers. Are you going to be burning diesel fuel to power the generators, which would be like the dirtiest way to do that? Right. But I think generally the overall regulatory mood in the country is let's get data centers built, and let's not worry too much about the local concerns or environmental concerns or clean water concerns or availability of all those resources. So I think that what you'll see here is trying to open the gates to have as many data centers as humanly possible in the United States and supply them with power. And that is going to mean, dirtier forms of energy. Really, you need all forms of energy to do it. But the Trump administration is, disincentivizing solar and wind. And so that's going to mean keeping dirtier power plants online longer, or maybe building more gas plants, which is cleaner than coal, but still isn't clean. Or developing nuclear. People call that an all of the above energy policy, but the administration is trying to devalue solar and wind as part of the all of the above.
I'm curious, having been a child of the 80s, I grew up in the 80s when every city of any size had a shopping mall or two, and there was a rush to build shopping malls. And now we look at 2025 and we have these huge, cavernous, dead malls, pilfering our landscape. And I can't help but wonder if we're going to be looking back in 20, 25, 30 years or so and looking at these data centers and going, we didn't really need these giant monoliths with all of that power-sucking necessity, and we're going to be stuck with these things for a long time. That's just something that's popped into my mind. I don't know if that's ever entered in the conversation when this stuff comes up.
I think the real shame is that you can't get an Orange Julius in those things.
Oh my gosh, yes, those were the days, man. Oh my, or the corn dog. Oh man, good times, good times. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you doing this reporting. I think this is a really important story, and again, here in Georgia, it's a political football, the discussion just about data centers and the sort of power supply that they will be needing from our utilities, how much folks are paying for that themselves versus the data centers. It's a fascinating story as we head into winter. David Schechter with CBS News from Dallas. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You do the same. Yeah, so I bring that question up, the need for building these massive data centers and the powers. The reason I bring this up, I was late to the game when it came to watching Mad Men, but I did binge Mad Men over the course of a summer, I think. And I was struck by how the ad agency that's at the center of the storyline in the 1960s bought their first computer. That first computer took up like nearly half of a floor of an office building. They literally had to move people out of their offices to make room for a computer that took up nearly an entire floor, half a floor, something like that, of an office building. Today, the ability that computer had, you have in your pocket or in the palm of your hand. It's on your like the chip, the size of the chip has gotten so ridiculously small that you just can't help but wonder if what we're racing to build and developing a power grid for now to handle is, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to look at that and go, oh my gosh, how quaint. Remember the size of a computer back in the day? How it used to take up rooms or a room, or it was a large block on your desk and the block under your desk. And now we have computers that like literally fit in our hands. We have laptops. I'm looking at a PC that literally is about the size of my hand. It's just a small block compared to what we used to have to buy just 10 years ago. Listen, if we're still at this 10, 15, 20 years down the road, I want you to remember that yours truly was the one that had this conversation. Do we really need to be building these massive data? I mean, I realize that the now is the situation, but I feel as if we're going to look back. I just do. This is just a hunch. I feel like we're going to look back and say 2040, maybe 2035 and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with these massive shells of buildings that we thought we're going to suck all the power out of our power supply? And, oh, by the way, we built to accommodate that and utility taxed ourselves, into poverty for a moment to build these things. And now we don't need a quarter of the size or a tenth of the size of the facility that we needed back then. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if the answer is to maybe be a little bit more cautious with our rollout. I do think it's beyond question. You can't ask, not in these times. FDR in his fireside chats, he could have asked the American people to curtail or ration. Don't ask anybody to ration their data. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Not in these times. So maybe stock up on the blankets, grab some extra firewood. If you don't have a fireplace, I don't know what you're going to do. And again, as you heard David Schechter say, this may be much ado about nothing. ... Now. And honestly, if you see or hear that Ted Cruz is at the airport in the wintertime, maybe just power your phone down for a little while and cut back on your data usage because you know what's coming. It's The Ron Show on Georgia Now. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. You may or may not have known this, but the Assistant Secretary at the Department of Health and Human Services is a former Georgian, former Augustan, actually. Admiral Brian Christine, who put out this statement yesterday through the HHS social media apparatus.
This is Admiral Brian Christine, the Assistant Secretary for Health at the Department of Health and Human Services. Over the past decade, the number of children and adolescents who reject their biological sex has risen dramatically. Some analyses indicate trans-identifying teens nearly doubled from 2022 to 2023. These young people and their families are searching for answers to gender dysphoria. They deserve honesty, compassion, and the strongest evidence for the help that the medical profession can offer. And that is why the United States Department of Health and Human Services worked with 9 academics with professional backgrounds in medicine, bioethics, psychology, and philosophy to conduct the most comprehensive review to date of the standard of care for gender dysphoria in minors. The findings within the 400-page peer-reviewed report are clear. Sex-rejecting procedures such as puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children are dangerous. They can cause infertility, a loss of sexual function, reduced bone density, metabolic and cognitive effects, and certainly surgical complications. They can scar kids, both physically and emotionally, for life, and they can do irreversible harm.
Actually, let's provide a little background on this study, using air quotes here. Both the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, and the Endocrine Society declined to participate in the review. A spokesperson for the Endocrine Society said the group didn't review the report, quote, as we weren't clear about the review process, but did not elaborate further. This report I'm reading to you from MedPage Today says that the AAP did not return a request for comment as of press time. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, which has long set the standard of care for transgender individuals, was not invited to review the report. Now we know why the authors were previously kept anonymous, according to Scott Leibowitz, doctor, child and adolescent psychiatrist, and WPATH board member, according to MedPage Today. He said, reports focused on transgender and gender-diverse individuals, especially those commissioned by the U.S. government, should be authored by experts who have dedicated their careers to serving the patient population. Regrettably, this is one of the only fields in medicine where having experience and understanding the complexities are viewed as deterrents rather than assets. Augusta's conservative radio host Austin Rhodes posting to the Austin Rhodes Show page that video that I played for you earlier, along with these words. Folks, this is huge, and it is the ultimate diss of the DEI madness. This has nothing to do with diversity, equity, inclusion. Madness that permeated the Biden administration and the American medical bureaucracy his appointees created. Finally, he writes in all caps, common sense prevails. Yeah, common sense used to dictate that you would marry and start bearing children with 13-year-old girls so that you could get enough children to work the farm. Common sense isn't always fact-based. It's based more on feelings. And I could have sworn that the right used to mock those who reacted via feelings. Austin continues, it is now policy that minor children are to be spared from gender-altering drugs and surgeries. Concludes, insanity for the sake of political correctness and the chronically woke. The part that I find really disturbing about this is that this comes out on the week of Transgender Awareness Week. Also today being Trans Day of Remembrance. I shared a link at my Facebook page. That would be at Ron Show ATL on Facebook. From LGBTQ Nation, honoring the 366 plus lives just so far this year. Trans individuals whose lives were lost too soon to either anti-trans violence or to self-harm, suicide. The cruelty tends to be the point with the Trump administration, after all, right? Of those lives lost so far just this year, they include Marisol Payero. And I'm going to read from a piece that friend of the show, Noelle Heatherland, wrote for Georgia Equality. Here is what they wrote. Recently here in Georgia, we have a new name to add to our list of those to remember. Marisol Mari Payero, a 22-year-old Latina trans woman and college student at Kennesaw State University. Noelle writes, I knew Mari as a fellow gender-expansive person and a fellow advocate, and obviously there is so much more to her than those aspects. She is not just another statistic. She was important to many, including her family and her fellow students. She served visibly as the president of the KSU Pride Alliance in a time where KSU and other universities are complying in advance and rolling back protections for and the dignity of certain students. In fact, Mari and I worked together with other student leaders to open the KSU Pride Center off campus a few months back so LGBTQ plus students could still have a safe space after the university shuttered the one on campus. Noelle continues, she loved the color blue, was a practicing Celtic druid, and was very proud of her personal connection to Argentina. Mari was very lucky when it came to being loved. She had family and friends who loved her dearly. We will miss your light, Mari. I'm sorry the weight of this world felt too heavy to bear. I wish you could have waited to see it get better, but I understand what it's like to feel that leaving is the best choice. Our love and prayers go to your family, and we will work hard to ensure you have a strong and lasting legacy as you deserve. We commit to fighting against transphobia in all its forms and calling out politicians when they say and do harmful things. May your memory be both a blessing and an inspiration to co-create a more inclusive and safer society for all of us, trans people, immigrants, and all of us. I responded to Austin Rhodes and his post, reminding him that Dr. Brian Christine Admiral Brian Christine is a doctor, a surgeon, not a psychologist, though. I offered to put Austin in touch with trans individuals or parents of trans youth who could enlighten him and his audience on something that he and his audience clearly, and the Admiral, clearly know precious little about. He did not take me up on that offer. He instead decided to respond with this statement. Dr. Brian Christine is an administrator articulating the positions of the administration, and the vast majority of the country agrees with this position. I thought the right called that mob rule. But please campaign against this policy and put the former Admiral out in front to do it. She is at home in the spotlight. Admiral Levine has quite the Q rating. But even that is anti-trans. First of all, yes, he is an administrator articulating the position of the administration, the same administration held together by an octogenarian who doesn't understand what shrinkflation is when it comes to comparing Walmart Thanksgiving packages from year to year. Austin's anti-trans sentiments are noted. Actually, that whole put Dr. Levine out in front part, that frat boy snark that drives a point home too. You see, Admiral Levine didn't have the benefit in her day of the kinds of therapy previously available to young people. Of course, as time sets in, our physical features take root no matter what we know ourselves to be internally, which is sort of the point. Now, I'm not making any judgment on Admiral Levine's physical appearance. I let the Austin Rhodes of the world do that. But I am saying that when you look at, say, a pop starlet like Kim Petras, who had her procedure by the age of 16 because she lived in Germany, a country more socially liberal than ours, and you look at Kim Petras, you can see she has a bright future in her truest self. She will not be mocked for what is seen of her. And that, along with simply the wish to live in their truest form, in their ultimate opportunity to be happy, is all that those in our trans community are asking for. That'll do it for today's Ron Show. We air 4 to 6 p.m. weekdays on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Oh, the replay, 8 to 10 a.m. weekdays on Georgia Now as well. Show notes, as always, at RonShowATL.com. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.